You alright?
I only used 1 GB UMA frame buffer and didn't run Cryo Utilities. 4 GB UMA frame buffer and Cryo Utilities.
To preface this video, I have absolutely nothing but the utmost respect for Digital Foundry and everyone working there. I've watched their content for years, driven purely out of my love for gaming and technology analysis. This video is no way meant to disrespect or tear apart any of their hard and much appreciated work. I decided to do this video as there was some comments in their video and some questions of my own as to whether using the 4 GB UMA frame buffer and Cryo Utilities as well could give any sort of performance differences. So I decided to test Dead Space Remake, Resident Evil 4 Remake, The Last of Us Part 1, Returnal, and Hogwarts Legacy. However, Cryobyte's video on Hogwarts Legacy is already way more in-depth than I could ever wish to go to. Me commenting any further on it, other than general Hogsmeade and flying around gameplay, would do a major disservice to his video. So if you're looking for the ultimate optimization guide for Hogwarts Legacy, please check out his video, link below. For testing Dead Space, since I only had the timed demo, I decided to just play the game and see how far I could get. Knowing that the intro sequence was the absolute hardest scene in the game, it wasn't surprising to see the frame rate drop here. However, once inside the USS Ishimura, things settle in.
Security clearance required.
In my very limited experience playing Dead Space, I can say that Digital Foundry's experience with Dead Space on the Steam Deck was fairly in line with mine, with a few exceptions. Although I kept the settings the same with respect to graphics options and resolution, I feel as though the deck could be brought up to its native resolution from 720p. As well, I did keep my FSR 2 upscaling set to performance most of the time, with some small testing with FSR Balanced at 40Hz and 30Hz. During my non-repeatable tests, performance was pretty solid. A few standout moments were the run up to the Kellyan before it explodes, as well as the gameplay beat after the explosion. The upper elevator area after encountering the meatball flinging spaghetti hands monster, and the puzzle combat room after the stasis arm challenge. These areas all exhibited low drops into the 30s and high 20s at times, and for inconsistent periods. Nothing longer than a few seconds, however. It was worth mentioning in regards to the smoothness or playability of the game in these areas. Having beaten Dead Space Remake on my desktop previously and my loose testing of this game to have been only the timed demo version, I cannot say for certain that with FSR set to performance you will always get above 30. However, I would say in these moments of severe dips, in CPU limited moments, similar performance will be felt on Ultra-Performance as well. I feel as though a baseline, I would start out with FSR Performance and tweak settings accordingly. Perhaps you are fine with low settings for the sake of smoother gameplay. That's the beauty of PC gaming, you have the option of how you want to play. In terms of frame time spikes, I did feel them, however I don't think they were as detrimental to my experience as compared to Oliver's. Whether this was due to the 4 GB UMA buffer or Cryo Utilities, I cannot say. However, the spikes were predictable in loading moments such as activating doors or the tram, and as Oliver stated in his video and in my experience on PC, these spikes happen no matter your hardware. It obviously just scales accordingly, and the higher the base FPS, the lesser the dips are felt, in theory. So these dips and spikes can be felt harder on the deck due to its lower base frame rate most of the time. The recommendations for playing Dead Space Remake on the Steam Deck are as follows. 1. Use FSR 2 Performance. 2. Lock the refresh rate to 40Hz if you are okay with knowing that there will be moments it goes below 40, touching 30 in some areas. But having it locked to 40 smooths out the frame time slightly and especially lower intensity scenes. 3. Lock the refresh rate to 30 Hz or 30 FPS if you are more susceptible to FPS dips. 4. Don't be afraid to test with your own custom settings. I didn't have time to test and change each graphic option individually in my time trial. There could be gains to be had there. Oliver's assessment was pretty spot on. Again, I will say that I wish they had given the Steam Deck its best possible shot. Knowing the rest of the game is mostly inside, in tight corridors or smaller areas, performance should be mostly consistent with my findings. In my opinion, save for heavy moments of combat or explosion and alpha effects. Next, we'll be getting into a game where I had more time with, and I could change around the settings more. We're going to be testing Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I chose to test the heavy intro bonfire scene. For my testing, I would start the benchmark off as I passed through the door threshold, then I would head straight towards the human bonfire and do 2 laps around the Burning Man. Once my laps were completed, I headed back towards the entrance and turned around to engage the enemy in combat. Combat consisted of me firing off my 7 pistol rounds, then getting into some sweet hand-to-hand combat. Essentially what this would look like is me missing all my shots, then turning the whole situation into a kangaroo court, leading me to get my eyes gouged out most of the time. I did multiple runs of each preset. As such, each run was varied every time. Depending on enemy placement and what was dropped for me item-wise, I survived shorter or longer. As such, I've also decided to include the length of gameplay slice as well, to help give some sort of idea. The longer the runs, especially the ones leading up to the chainsaw cutscene, had a lot more moments of grab animations and enemies being packed together. This would cause the biggest frame dips and frame time spikes in my experience. Most of the time, it was during moments of inaction, such as Leon flipping an enemy over his back. It's unfortunate that it happens, however the frame time spikes were rarely felt in my experience in actual control time. I cannot speak to late stage gameplay, however I did play for a few hours past the intro as well, and it was fairly consistent with my experience around the fire. Playing Resident Evil 4 on the deck felt great, as it should, seeing as it is a deck verified game. Doing Resident Evil 4 custom settings listed here. We started off doing FSR Balance, just to get a baseline of what the average experience might be like. So as we can see here, we were above 30 FPS every run, so there's no concern there. The 1% lows, they are below 30. They're, honestly, in my experience, these 1% lows and the 0.1% lows, those moments were felt in the moments of inaction. Again, so when Leon's flipping somebody over his back or getting grabbed by an enemy, that's when those dips were felt and those inconsistent frame times. Moment-to-moment gameplay, 99% of the time, stutter-free, save for moments of dense, packed areas of enemies and you panning the camera around very quickly. Those were the only times I was really able to get it to trip up in the gameplay moments. So bringing it over to FSR Quality, bringing over our longest FSR Balanced run here, we can see that the performance is still above 30, and honestly the 1% lows and the 0.1% lows are pretty well in line with FSR Balanced. So FSR Quality is a contender for a 30 Hz lock in my opinion. Bringing it over to FSR Performance, again carrying over the 2 longest runs from the past 2 slides, we can see that the performance does gain over FSR Quality, obviously, and slightly over Balanced, mainly in the 1% lows that we kind of see that gain. The FPS average still roughly about the same, still above 30 though. And bringing it over to FSR Ultra-Performance, while bringing the 3 previous runs in, the 3 longest previous runs, we can see here that going over Ultra-Performance, you gain a little bit in the FPS averages over FSR Performance and Balanced, obviously, and hopefully over Quality as well. The 1% lows were a touch better as well, but in line with even, honestly, the FSR Balanced and the FSR Quality runs at times. So comparing our longest chainsaw run here of the 118 seconds and 109 seconds versus FSR Performance and Ultra Performance, we can see here that honestly it's not too far off. we have a 33.5 FPS average for performance mode and a 36.4 FPS average for ultra-performance, versus a 1% low of 18.9 and a 23.7 for ultra-performance. 0.1% lows were fairly similar. With that, my suggestion would not to be use FSR Ultra-Performance. It would be to use FSR Performance as your baseline and then adjusting upwards in quality from there, according to your tastes. My opinion, FSR Ultra-Performance should only be used on 4K and 8K screens. The image degradation quality, especially on the Steam Deck screen, is too great in my opinion for the performance gains. And so, moving over to the Digital Foundry recommended settings, I decided to test FSR Quality through Ultra-Performance. So we can see here, I have the longest runs of my settings, the custom settings from FSR Quality, Balanced, and Ultra-Performance listed on top. And then we have 3 runs of FSR Quality with DF settings. So as we can see here, switching over to the Digital Foundry settings for Quality versus Quality FSR, we can see an immediate gain in the 1% lows and the 0.1% lows. Mainly, in the 1% lows and the FPS averages, though. So we can see here now we're consistently above 30, even in FSR Quality. So things should only be getting better from here. So going down to FSR Balanced, we can see here that we're getting even better gains. We had 35 versus Quality FPS average, now we have 37. And again, the FPS 1% low is 29, so it's a very smooth experience. On one of the longer runs, yes, the 1% lows did get lower, but again, that was in heavier combat areas, more grab animations, things like that. The FPS average was still high. Kicking it down to performance, again, more gains to be had. Not as much this time, but slightly. 1% lows are still in line, and the FPS averages just keep going up, very slightly. This is where I personally would cut it off. But if you want to go to FSR Ultra-Performance, that's where you might be able to get a 40 Hz lock. This is what I did. It might look a little confusing at first. So all my tests were done in 720p as per the DF recommended settings. So I did do FSR Ultra-Performance 3 times at 720p, and then I did 2 more runs at 800p just to see if we could see any major differences. So as you can see, the 1% lows were about the same in line with my second run, with the chainsaw run. And these runs were average longer than these 40 and 60 second runs, obviously. So more opportunities for frame stutters, frame rate drops, things of that nature. But as we can see, 800p versus 720p, performance is almost neck and neck. I honestly would just stick with going native resolution 800p. I wouldn't bother going 720p with this one, guys. And again, avoid ultra performance unless you're looking for that 40 Hz all the time lock. These tests were done in the heavy areas, so areas beyond this, interior scenes, dungeons and things like that, performance will skyrocket from here. This was, in my opinion, probably the heaviest scene I could reproduce multiple times over and over. There are moments of heavier scenes in the later game. However, I think this kind of is a good baseline to say, okay, if we can get 40 FPS average or 30 FPS average, we're going to get locked 30 FPS or 40 FPS throughout the rest of the game, or very, very close to. As per my results, using my settings, you can achieve a 30 FPS average with frame dips here and there. Momentary drops to the high 20s were seen from FSR Quality to Balanced. However, performance was smoother with Performance and Ultra-Performance modes. If you wanted to have a mostly solid 30 FPS lock, you could choose to lock your frame rate to 30 FPS, otherwise you could leave it at a 40 Hz lock and leave it as an uncapped 30, knowing that there will be moments of it dropping to and sometimes below 30. Choosing your preferred upscaling level as well as your frame rate limit to your tolerances will be key. For instance, I have no problem implementing a 40 Hz lock and running an uncapped 30 using FSR Balanced. In lighter scenes it hits 40 no problem. In heavier outdoor scenes, drops will be present, I personally would not go below performance, as the gains in performance versus degradation damage quality is not worth it for me. Using DF recommended settings, I was able to achieve an even greater average, with a 35 FPS average in FSR Quality and up to 40 FPS average in FSR Ultra-Performance. When switching over to 800p, all results were extremely similar as well. Depending on the level of graphical fidelity you choose, whether you use my settings, DFs, or your own, the Steam Deck running 4GB UMA frame buffer and Cryo Utilities does seem to have a positive performance increase versus Oliver's experience. I wouldn't recommend a 60Hz FPS experience with this game, as in lighter areas you will hit 60 FPS, however there are plenty of areas where you will be sub 40. As such, the huge swing in frame rate often feels bad to play. I did attempt lowering everything to my lowest possible settings, and even running in Ultra Performance, it still was nowhere near a 60 FPS lock in that bonfire test scenario. My recommendations for Resident Evil 4 are as follows. For a higher fidelity, try my settings or put your own spin on it. I think retaining the corpse dismemberment, object destruction, and advanced enemy animation are key to a more environmental experience and should remain on, in my opinion. A 30 or 40 FPS limit should be used here. 2. For more performance, you can run Ultra Performance on my settings or run DF settings using your preferred level of FSR. I would advise using a 40Hz lock here, however if you are comfortable with drops from 60 to 30 FPS, by all means. Dropping settings any further, I believe, is detrimental to the experience and not worth the performance gains, as you still will be met with low FPS in heavy areas. Hogwarts Legacy will be a rather easy game to cover, as Cryobite has already done his deck dive on the matter. If you've not seen his video, I do recommend checking it out. For my gameplay, I chose his balanced option as I felt this was the most reasonable for the deck. A 40Hz lock with a near 40 FPS lock outside of Hogsmeade and a reported 35 to 40 inside. For my testing, I chose to start off in Hogsmeade and run from the candy shop all the way to the main entrance. I completed this test using FSR Balanced, and I was able to achieve an average of 33 to 36 FPS. Flying straight from Hogsmeade to Hogwarts gave me an average of 35 to 40 FPS in my runs. Streaming stuttering was felt in these runs specifically. For my final test, as I was using my wife's completed game save, I handed my deck over to her and told her to go to the heaviest combat area she knew of and go blow stuff up. This resulted in a steady 40 FPS average for her 2 minutes of destruction. Her main complaint was the awkwardness of the touchpad and the D-pad locations, but said the game felt great. She offered to do it more times, however I felt confident enough in her testing, backed up by Cryobite's extensive data. I won't dwell on this too much, but the only times I did feel frame time spikes were in Hogsmeade and while flying. It seemed as though in my fumbling combat that the frame time was fairly steady and my wife did not complain of any stutters. In conclusion, with regards to Hogwarts Legacy, I believe that while Oliver's experience and findings were valid with his setup, there is a better way to experience Hogwarts Legacy than what he reported. Mainly, I believe with the tweaks in Cryo Utilities and the UMA frame buffer, tighten up the frame time and frame rate. There are quite a few performance profiles courtesy of Cryobite, so there should be something to suit your needs. Again, not to say that Oliver's findings were incorrect in any way. They are absolutely valid, and for some people who do not know of the tweaks you can do to Steam Deck, the default way of play may be all they ever know. So knowing that performance does stutter in the default experience, seeing this through DF may turn them off of the game. Rightfully so, as I would not play it in this default state. If you're unsure of any of this, please follow Cryobite's tutorials.
Don't try it again.
I decided to purchase The Last of Us. Even though I've already played it and beaten it a few times, I figured this was a good game to stress the deck, with at least maybe a slight hope of either being playable now with tweaks or perhaps in the future with optimization updates. As well, I wanted to do benchmark comparisons in the future with the Asus ROG Ally. I went into this with the absolute lowest of expectations. Everything I've seen up until this point has made me believe that The Last of Us is still in a poor state on PC, although getting better through optimizations. In the process of my testing, I had planned to get to the encounter just before getting to Bill, with the school buses and dense foliage. However, while things started out well running the game in FSR Balanced mode, quickly as more and more complex things began to happen, I had to drop down to FSR Performance, and not long after, to even try to get close to 30 in some scenes, mainly as you try to escape the city in the heavy downpour, I had to drop it down to FSR Ultra-Performance. What started out as a glimmer of hope for the Steam Deck quickly descended into a very poor experience. Noting as well that the graphics, textures, options are locked out completely on Linux. You can change these through a file edit, however I didn't bother with this as everything was already set to low. The Last of Us on the Steam Deck is unfortunately left in an unplayable state. Aside from the fact that it looks closer to its PS3 version as opposed to the PS5, with inconsistent frame rates, even with 30 FPS lock, your experience will be less than stellar. However, if you must play or try The Last of Us on the Steam Deck, I recommend that you just drop everything to low, install a 30 FPS cap, and play at performance to ultra performance. Just know you will not have a good time with this game all of the time. My testing methodology for Returnal was to set everything to low, run it at 800p, and complete benchmarks at native resolution, FSR Quality, and FSR Performance. Then I tested the actual game using FSR Performance. My findings were fairly consistent with Oliver's in this one. You'll notice that although the averages are around 30 FPS, and in the gameplay it was at 34, in actual gameplay moments of stutter are felt, mainly between combat areas and when doors are open. However, some stutters can be witnessed in moment-to-moment gameplay. I was able to complete a fairly lengthy new save run. Again, although the average was above 30, the moments of stutter and FPS drop were too great to be able to declare Returnal on the deck a good experience. I have fairly high tolerances for bad feeling controls and performance, and although I completed a decent run, I still would not recommend you purchase Returnal if the Steam Deck is your only way of play. In conclusion, this revisit of select games from Digital Foundry's Too Big for Steam Deck video did show, at least in my opinion, performance increases for Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, as well as Hogwarts Legacy. However, the same cannot be said for The Last of Us and Returnal. There was a slight moment of hope for The Last of Us, but alas, it was too much for the deck. I do believe that there is a positive gain to be had by using tools such as Cryo Utilities and tweaking your BIOS settings. However, as many users have reported, the UMA frame buffer increase does not always result in a performance gain. Although rare, it does happen in Red Dead Redemption 2. It's always best to check online to see if other Steam Deck users have reported issues in your favorite games while using these tweaks. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, there will be a short video at the end of this one to show you how to do these things to your deck. That'll do it for this video, guys. If you made it through from beginning to end, I really appreciate it. Just know that this isn't perfect. There are obviously flaws to my testing, and I admit that. These benchmarks were not one for one, and they weren't meant to be. They were just meant to be general gameplay benchmarks in the average kind of experience. But again, thank you for watching to the end. If you subscribe, thank you. It's not necessary, but definitely appreciated. Currently, we're at 441 subscribers as of recording at 3:30 on Wednesday, the 24th. I'm going to have this video set to go live likely this Friday, and there'll be the giveaway, again, sparsed out through the video. Again, sorry, I don't know what the code is. It's a random code, and they don't give me the title. Obviously, if I redeem it, and then I would know what it is. So it could be something awesome, could be something not so awesome. So I either apologize or congratulations for your great or bad game. You're welcome and sorry. That'll do it for this one. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.